Yes, you actually introduced this term to me, phygital, and I just like can't let it go. I'm like, that is like the coolest thing. I mean, just the word itself is cool. Welcome to Church Media HQ, where we equip church leaders to maximize their impact through the power of communication. My name is Luke Clayton, and I'm excited to have a special co-host with me today, Josh Irmler, all the way from Fresno, California. Josh, thanks for being with us.
Man, I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation since you mentioned it to me. It's been a topic that I've been really passionate about, that our leadership team's been passionate about. So I'm looking forward to talking about this thing of Phygital Church. So thanks for inviting me to be a part.
Yes, you actually introduced this term to me, phygital, and I just like can't let it go. I'm like, that is like the coolest thing. I mean, just the word itself is cool.
Phygital, of course, is taking the word physical and digital and kind of bringing them together. So when we're talking about Phygital Church, we're talking about how do we seamlessly blend a physical gathering and a digital gathering in a way that just really works cohesively. So for anybody who is thoroughly confused by the use of that word, hopefully that helps them out.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to lie, it threw me off at first when I heard it, but, now it makes sense, and like I said, I love it. And so we've been in a series now that we're calling Reboot, and the idea is that we're really, I mean, from businesses to individuals to churches. I mean, we are in a reboot phase as far as we've gone through this pandemic. It has really just kind of uprooted everybody, everything. And, just like when you reboot a computer or a device of some type, it kind of brings a lot of nice new, it can bring some welcome changes. It can refresh some things and kind of just make things new. And the concept that we're exploring as we talk about Phygital is not longing for things to go back to normal, but creating the new normal. And that, because there is I think I heard a thought leader say the other day, he predicts that we're going to actually, when everything's said and done, the world is not going to be normal as it was. We're going to be about 70 to 80% normal. The other 20 to 30% is up to us to determine how that's going to be. And the way I see it, the church has always been lagging behind. They've always been the one to kind of be playing catch up. And with churches being so drastically impacted by this pandemic and what we've been through as churches and as the world these past few months, they are the ones I believe that can actually lead the way and change. And I think it'd be awesome to see the church set the new precedent, if you will, the new standard in some of these areas. And so I think as we talk into that, just for those out there who maybe they're a little bit skeptical about this idea of trying to move forward more with digital ministry and outreach and creating this, what we're calling this Phygital environment. The thing I think we have to do, we have to embrace the data, first of all. And we've got some stats here that we want to share. According to Barna Group, nearly half of all surveyed congregations have reported higher attendance numbers when they're talking about their online when compared to a typical in-person service pre-COVID. Now, Josh, you're a pastor there at Fresno Church, and are you seeing this to be the case in your particular congregation?
I think it's a really good question. And because of the methodology that we embraced, moving into a highly interactive type online experience, we actually did see an increase in attendance very early on. And I think most churches actually saw an increase in attendance. I think where we were at in our own local context was we were afraid that the novelty of all those extra people logging in online, watching the service online, was not something that was sustainable for the long haul. We were here in California. There was a sense that this COVID thing wasn't going to get over in 2 or 3 weeks, that maybe we would have to navigate this for several months. And now looking back 5 or 6 months, that has been the case. And so we adopted an approach using conference call technology like Zoom, to actually run our entire services through. And so what I think that allowed us to do is, once the novelty of online church wore off for a lot of different ministries, we were able to see those numbers stay much, much higher than the national average. And so that would definitely be something we were seeing. However, I would throw out there that a lot of folks, while early on they were seeing higher online attendances, that quickly dramatically dropped after Easter. This all started in March. After Easter, there was a dip, and then after Mother's Day, there was another dip heading into the summer. And I think a lot of folks now are asking themselves, how do we do online church when it's not novel and it's not new? And I think these are some of the things we better wrestle with.
Yeah, and that is true. I was actually, it kind of depends from what I've observed with the church leaders I've worked with. It really has been all about how they have approached their digital, their online, because I think most defaulted to, well, you know what, we're just going to essentially, not all, and I say most, many at least, they defaulted to, well, we're just going to live stream like we used to, just in an empty auditorium. And, that quickly kind of lost its, engagement factor. I saw that in several churches, and it's the ones like yourself that said, we're going to do things a little bit different. We're going to, because here's the truth: when it comes to an exclusively online audience, it's a much different dynamic. Whereas, and that's why even now, as we're watching sports come back online, they don't have that live audience, and they're even trying to replicate it with like putting in sound effects and things like that, which I think is kind of funny. And we're yet to be seen how that's going to be
these next few weeks. But
so what you're saying is maybe we should add like sound effects for the church services, like amens and hallelujahs in the middle of the preaching. Is that what I'm getting from you right here?
Yeah. Maybe that's a new product line we need to develop here at Church Meet HQ is like sound effects. Like pick your style. Like, are you more traditional? We got amens and stuff, and then, over here we got like, I don't know if we could like put in some raised hands or something, even like something like you overlay. I don't know, but yeah. So yeah, this statistic is it's from Barna Group, so it's accurate. However, I think it is going to vary amongst churches and how they approached it. Now, I do know this, and this stat I've heard several times from several sources. The creator of the church online platform, Life Church, they reported nearly 2.5 million live stream viewership increases amongst churches people were going online. In fact, I think before the pandemic, they had like 3,000 active churches using church online, and now they've got I think they're knocking on 30,000. So like a 10x increase there. And what I think, and again, like what you said, I think this is great because, there was kind of this initial hype, if you will. In my opinion, though it was different, it was the most successful Easter for the church in, really probably since the original Easter. We're talking as far as viewership and people that watched. And that's very hard to track as far as people that maybe came to Christ and whatnot. But I, like you said, after Easter, it kind of lost its hype. But nonetheless, it did bring attention for churches that maybe weren't taking their online ministry very seriously, or maybe they weren't taking it seriously, or maybe just weren't putting a lot into it, or weren't doing it at all, to kind of like say, hey, no, this is important. Like one church I know, they kind of overhauled their entire AV system during the shutdown. It was a good, and it was a good time to do it. So I think with this data that we see, that's something we have to embrace. It's there. It means something. And so now we've got to, after we've kind of accepted, we've embraced the data, we have to now embrace this Phygital experience. And so in a regular service, most, they receive interaction with the leaders of their church and they're going to be acknowledged by, simply just sitting in the audience. That's just kind of what you do. That's how you participate. You come, if you want to, shout amen, or, raise a hand, whatever, that's your choice. But you are interacted with because the leaders on the stage, the pastor, they're making eye contact with you. They're seeing you and whatever. But when you're online, most churches have taken this kind of one-way approach in that, okay, well, now the speaker, the pastor, whoever's leading the service, they're just looking at a camera and looking at you, and there's no interaction there, And I said, I think those are the churches that really saw that dip, if you will, because there's no interaction there. And I will say, I mean, big disclaimer, nothing replaces physical gathering. Nothing is a substitute for that. But there has to be a way to create that interactive experience, and I'm excited to get into this part of our conversation because what you've been doing, Josh, is really cool. So let's first consider that digital audience. Talking about the digital audience that is still viewing online, for whatever reason they've chosen not to come back to live, in-person services. Something simple that I've seen is, one of the simple ways to just acknowledge that your online audience is there. I'm amazed at how many churches before and now after the shutdown, they don't acknowledge. They don't say, hey, we want to welcome our online viewers. It's almost like they're just an afterthought, and it's all about the live, who's actually there in person. And I think if nothing else, treat the person treat the camera rather like it's another person. Make eye contact with it. Don't be afraid to look at the camera every once in a while and address your online audience. Because when it comes to even if you are taking this approach where, hey, all we're doing is just we got a camera rolling in the back, streaming our services and whatever, even just simply looking into the camera, like I'm looking into a camera right now that if those are watching watching this episode online, it's a big difference than when I look away. It makes a big it just something about it does draw you in. In film, the term is breaking the fourth wall because you actually look. So, because the live stream service, it's a window into your church, it's providing a space for people to where they can, hey, maybe they've never visited before, they can actually look and kind of see this in this virtual window of what's going on. So acknowledging them is huge. And Josh, what you've done to kind of go way beyond acknowledging, which kind of takes us into our next point of interaction, is incredible. So I'd like you to kind of walk us through what your kind of process has been for this.
Yeah, so when we originally went to online, we knew that there were basically three different approaches that people were taking. Some were doing pre-recorded videos where they would upload it to YouTube or Facebook, and that were filming it, 2-3 days before. And there were some definite pros to that approach. One of the big pros was there was not as many technological issues for the guys who took that route. They'd upload it and it would work seamlessly for the end user. And that was a solid approach that many guys were taking. It allowed for a little bit more creativity and allowed you to kind of be more intentional on the outside of what exactly was going to get into the service. The second approach was a live stream approach, and a lot of guys did a live stream, whether it was on Facebook or whether it was through some other medium where they would just do a service live. And the third approach that we ended up taking, and a few others took, was what we would call an interactive broadcast. We used conference call technology, like I mentioned before. We used Zoom because it was our conviction that if we were going to keep people for the long haul staying engaged, it could not just be something that they were a spectator in, but it really needed to be a participatory, it needed to be something that they were personally engaged in, that they could participate in. And so the Zoom technology, while it was not made or created for a church gathering experience, it was something that we felt could potentially keep the bar high when it comes to interaction. And so we leaned right into that from week one, and it was not without its technological challenges. In fact, it was probably a month or two before we had a service that went halfway smooth, but it was well worth the investment of creating an environment that was more interactive that wasn't as polished, rather than having a environment that was really polished but lacked a lot of interaction. So we leaned into the interaction over the polish, and now over months we've been able to polish it up. And I feel like our interactive live broadcast has just as much quality as anybody else's pre-recorded
Hmm.
service or live stream,
Hmm.
but with the added benefit of, because we went through the growing pains, it has a ton of interactive value. So when we talk about interactive, obviously we're on Zoom right now. The truth is, we can talk to each other. So during our services, we would have times before the service started, where we would be talking to everybody who was jumping in. We could see their face, they could see ours, we could communicate with each other. People who were in other homes, they could communicate with each other and talk to each other and interact with each other. In fact, they could find another friend and they could break out into another room, and the two of them could talk by themselves, about what's going on and what's taking place and things. And so there was all of this interaction that was happening, even before the service got started. Then once the service got started, hey, I could look at somebody on the screen, and the guys on our media team put together a huge, flat screen television with everybody's faces on it. I could look and say, hey, Mr. So-and-so, why don't you start the service in a word of prayer? And then later on, I could say, hey, Mrs. So-and-so, why don't you read the scripture? And why don't you, anybody have a prayer request or a praise that they want to share? And anybody who wanted to could raise their hand. And so I'm not gonna lie, there were a lot of logistical, technological issues that we ran into early on because Zoom's not made for church services. However,
Hmm.
once we tackled every one of those
Hmm.
issues, the reality is we created this highly interactive online experience that really kept people coming back week after week after week after week. And
Yeah.
the possibilities were endless. Even in my sermon, I remember there were times I would, maybe I was using a basketball illustration, and I would tell the kids that were there, hey, why don't you guys run to, your room and grab a basketball real quick? And they'd run up to the room, grab a basketball. And it just, all the things we could do that were interactive that you couldn't necessarily do on other platforms. And there's some interaction you can have, Facebook Live, hey, chat or answer this question, but the
Hmm.
amount of
Hmm.
interaction you can have with conference call technology is exponentially more than you can have on any other type of platform. So while were some challenges that we had to kind of work through, the reality is, in the end, with our values of participation and interaction being so high, it really allowed for that to happen very, very effectively.
Yeah, and that is just because you think about it. Whenever you are involved with anything as far as a live experience, like for example, why do people obviously, like I said, in this example, this particular analogy, I could see how somebody could pick it apart. But for example, talking about sports again, when everything was normal and you could go to a game, but you can go to a game or you can watch it at home. And I'm the kind of person where I'm like, you know what, unless I can get, I'm not a huge sports guy, so unless I can get like super cheap tickets, whatever, I'm just going to stay at home. If I want to watch it, in my mind, the experience is about the same. But we know that for obviously the thousands of people that attend sporting events, there's something about the interaction factor. Is when my team scores, I can cheer. I can chant defense. I can do these things, and like I said, we're even seeing like the NBA kind of try to implement what you're talking about, this type of live interaction, even with virtual fans, but it's something about even when you're watching something live. And even if it's a virtual experience, and just knowing that, hey, you know what, like, my input could be desired. You know what I'm saying? I guess that's kind of how it looks. Is some people, they're going to be introverted. They don't want you to call on them to pray or something like that. But others, and many people deep down inside, they just, hey, just the fact that I could be acknowledged and seen, and just something as simple as you being able to look specifically at a family that's watching on Zoom and say, hey, we're so glad the Smith family's with us today. Thanks for being with us. Just that, and just knowing that, I can see how that would keep people engaged, and keep people coming back.
Even if a specific individual doesn't get engaged, the fact, like what you're saying, the fact that they know they are being seen, that they are being, acknowledged, that is happening in the environment around them, it creates a different perspective than if they were
Hmm.
just watching something that had been pre-recorded or something that there wasn't that same level of engagement. It's almost like people, even though they don't maybe want to participate themselves, I think everybody wants to know that they can if they wanted to. And I think there's something very
Hmm.
real to that.
Like you said, and really, we were kind of talking about this, before we pressed record. You're talking about you might be putting. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, but you might be putting a more cohesive playbook about this, and I hope you're able to do that. But I do recognize that there's going to be some churches out there. It's just not for them. This approach, or whether it's logistical reasons, technical reasons, or maybe it's just not their culture. And so for that, I think there are other ways, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, that you can create interaction, and I think one of the most underutilized things that anybody could have been doing all along, similar to just acknowledging and looking at the camera, acknowledging your online audience, is tapping into chat and these comment features that are, it's built into YouTube, Facebook. And if you're using we mentioned the Church Online platform earlier, they have this chat feature built in. And it's just, even being able to say like, hey, chat, hey, put something in the chat, let us know you're here. Let us know where you're watching from, this type of stuff, just keeping people interactive, even though that's through just a written, chat and text type feel, it's still something that keeps people engaged. And so that moves kind of into this idea of, just being, like I said, just reemphasizing, I should say, the idea of simply being interactive and engaging your online audience somehow. I mean, the way that Josh has done it with Zoom, and like I said, I do hope that you're able to, like I said, maybe put together a playbook or some type of resource to where people can tap into this more, because I think it's a fantastic concept. Now, Josh, I will kind of close out our conversation with this question. Do you anticipate this being the new normal of church services for you? Because you're in California, and so your reopening plan is I feel so bad for California churches. So your reopening plan is pretty open-ended, I would assume. But how much of this do you think will be the new normal for your church 12 months from now?
You know what? The reality is the more we lean into it, the more it is becoming a normal. So I'll say this, we've been back at live gatherings now, for about 6 weeks. And part of when we say phygital, what we've done is we've totally restructured our Sunday morning environment to where we have continued to do what we were doing online with Zoom, but now we are incorporating a live audience into it. So that means on a Sunday morning, just to give people a kind of a vision for what this looks like, there are literally televisions on the platform with all the people who are watching via Zoom. So everybody who is in the live audience can see the people who are at home watching from their homes. Vice versa, we have cameras on the audience so the people at home can see the people who are there in the service. So it gives, just like if you went to church, you could look around the auditorium and see everybody who is there. That same type of environment is happening. We have continued with this interactive service program, so we try not to let 5 minutes go by without involving somebody else in the service. And now what we've done is we've set up a station in our auditorium where if the person stands at that station, they can read scripture, they can pray, they can give a testimony, and if they're standing in this particular place, there's lighting and cameras and audio equipment to where everything is getting projected into Zoom, so the people who are involved in the service live in person in our auditorium can also be experienced by the people who are at home. And so when I say phygital, this really is the full culmination of phygital, where we are trying to get our physical experience back to where it was before COVID, but now maintain everything that we've learned through our digital interactive experience and now blend them seamlessly into one cohesive unit. And so that's where we are right now. And honestly, for us, um, yeah, that might be our new normal moving forward here in California, depending on how things go. I would say at least through the rest of the year, it's going to be what we do. And from there, we just got to kind of feel it out as we go.
Well, I would argue, that, a few, I mean, really, it's been a few decades ago, I suppose, but I guess really it's kind of been a slow, progressive thing over the past, 20 years or so. We've seen churches, they transition from a traditional format to a more what would be termed maybe contemporary format. So, new worship style. A lot of churches, they don't have like the traditional choir anymore. They have a worship band instead. They start to use things like screens and, more advanced lighting and things like that. But now that's kind of the new traditional, if you will. Like it's been going on for so long. This is just what churches are doing now. And so I could argue that I could see the argument that, yeah, we are in a phase now to where this is going to be your new transition to church, is how you incorporate this digital audience and your physical audience, how you're able to blend the two, as you're saying. And so I'm excited to see where it goes, honestly. I think it's a great opportunity. But yeah, so Josh, tell us a little bit about you, how we can connect with you. I know you're involved with Idea Network and things, so, anything you want to plug it now.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I try to stay somewhat active on social media, so check me out on Facebook at Joshua Irmler on Facebook. I try to connect with folks there, and I love specifically connecting with church leaders. I feel a real passion for that. And then I will say this as well. I am involved. I'm a John Maxwell executive coach. And so I really do enjoy working with ministry leaders one-on-one on a regular basis and whenever those opportunities arise. So maybe there's somebody out there and you're like, man, I want to do a deep dive into what, online church interactive broadcasts might look like. Man, I'd love to, be able to connect with you, and rather than just having a phone call for 20 minutes, maybe do a deep dive into some of this stuff and talk more didactically about how to navigate, this type of world. And so I enjoy coaching ministry leaders, and I have the privilege of doing that on a regular basis. And I am the co-founder, along with Josh Tice, of the Idea Network. And of course, that is a network of events where we have conversations around the country about the most innovative and creative things on the cutting edge of church world. And so we have our Idea Night coming up in October. We have several speakers that are going to be presenting that evening. That particular event takes place in churches literally all across the country, and we'll come together on a single evening and kind of in a simulcast type of way, be able to watch these presentations as well as be able to have conversations with other ministry leaders in our local areas around those topics. And so be on the lookout for that as well. And hopefully a few of those things might be a help to your audience. And let me just say, Luke, I know we've worked together on some projects and things, and I am super, super excited about some of the things that you have coming down the pipeline. In fact, I was telling you a few minutes ago, just kind of some things that you'll have unveiling toward the end of the year, I think can be a huge, huge help to the church world. And I'm excited to see, this, I don't know if you've unveiled it yet or how much you've talked about it to your audience, but I'll just give a plug for that, saying this is going to be huge. And so I hope as soon as, your audience has the opportunity, I hope they'll jump on board 100%, because it's going to be a massive, massive help to any churches that adopt it.
Well, hey, Josh, I appreciate that, and yeah, we are. It's we are just like churches have been. We've had to readjust. We've had to make some changes, and so yep, Church Media HQ is kind of experiencing its own overhaul, and yeah, so that's a great segue into for those of you out there. Be sure to head over to churchmediahq.com to get connected with us there. There are some of these resources available now. Our coach is available, our coach service. our creative. You can access creative, and we've got more coming. And so, yeah, thanks, Josh, for your shout out there. And I will say this about Josh: if you are looking for a coach, he is great. He has been my coach for several months now, and I really enjoy. He's so helpful, especially in this church marketing creative space. He has a lot of insight and knowledge there, so I highly recommend it. And the Idea Network. Unfortunately, you know, all the idea days and events have been kind of, some of them had to be canceled and whatever, but, these idea nights are awesome. And then, of course, you have the Idea Summit, which is next year, I believe. So anyways, yeah, get connected with Josh and the Idea Network and everything he's got going on there. And yeah, so, hey, we want to thank you for being with us today, Josh. I really appreciate having you here as my guest host, if that makes sense. You know, I've heard, but so glad you were with us, and thank you for watching wherever you're watching, listening. Be sure to subscribe, like. We'd love to hear your feedback, so be sure to give us, send us your feedback by whether you're commenting or shooting us an email or whatever. We'd love to hear from you. And if you really enjoyed this content, don't be a jerk and hoard it all to yourself. Share it with someone. Share it with another church leader, and keep in mind. I want to encourage you, and I always do. Try something new, because it is so much better to fail at trying something awesome than to succeed at just doing the average. So thanks again for joining us right here on Church Media HQ.